You know that moment when you realize your friend dated your crush behind your back and you helped her fiancé propose to you instead? Yeah, that's exactly the kind of delicious karma sandwich I'm about to serve you today. But let's rewind to where this whole clusterfuck started, because trust me, the setup makes the payoff so much sweeter. 3 months ago, I was living my best single life, nursing what I thought was a harmless crush on this guy Jake from my marketing class. You know the type. Tall, dark hair that always looked like he just rolled out of bed in the most attractive way possible, and this smile that made my stomach do those annoying little flips every time he looked in my direction. I'd been orbiting around this crush for months, doing that pathetic dance we all do when we're too chicken to actually make a move. Staying after class to ask questions I already knew the answers to, laughing a little too hard at his jokes, finding excuses to text him about assignments that didn't exist. The worst part? I was so fucking transparent about it. My best friend Sarah knew everything. Every text exchange got dissected over coffee. Every accidental run-in at the campus bookstore became a full debriefing session. She was my wingwoman, my confidant, my partner in crime when it came to analyzing every microscopic interaction with Jake, or so I thought. The betrayal hit me like a freight train on a Tuesday afternoon, because apparently life doesn't give you the courtesy of falling apart on weekends when you're already planning to be miserable. I was walking across campus, mentally rehearsing how I was finally going to ask Jake to study together for our upcoming midterm, when I saw them. At first, my brain couldn't process what my eyes were showing me. Jake and Sarah sitting on our bench, the one where she and I had spent countless hours dissecting every detail of my pathetic crush, and they were kissing. Not a friendly peck, not an accidental brush of lips. Full-on, hands in hair, I want to devour you kissing. My feet stopped moving. My heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest and drop-kicked across the quad. The world went silent except for this high-pitched ringing in my ears that made everything feel like I was watching someone else's life through a fishbowl. They pulled apart, and Sarah was laughing at something Jake whispered in her ear. The same laugh she'd been giving me for weeks whenever I gushed about how cute he was. The same laugh that now felt like acid in my veins. I stood there like a complete idiot, clutching my backpack strap so hard my knuckles went white, watching my best friend live out my fantasy with the guy I'd been pining over for months. That's when the rage started building. Not the hot, explosive kind that makes you scream and throw things. The cold, calculating kind that starts in your stomach and spreads through your entire body like ice water. I turned around and walked home in a daze, my brain playing the same loop over and over. Sarah knew. She knew how I felt about Jake, and she went after him anyway. The next few hours were a blur of angry tears and frantic texting to other friends, trying to figure out how long this had been going on behind my back. The answer, courtesy of my friend Emma, who'd seen them together at a party last weekend, was at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks of Sarah sitting across from me, listening to me agonize over whether Jake liked me back, all while she was probably laughing internally about how clueless I was. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Hey babe, wanna grab dinner tonight? I have so much to tell you." I stared at that message for a full 5 minutes, my hands shaking with the urge to throw my phone across the room. She wanted to tell me, probably some bullshit story about how it just happened, and she didn't mean for it to happen this way, and she hoped I'd understand. Instead of responding, I did what any rational person would do. I stalked both their social media accounts like a detective building a case. And that's when I found the smoking gun. Jake's Instagram story from 3 days ago showed him at some restaurant downtown, and if you looked carefully in the reflection of his wine glass, you could see Sarah taking the photo. 3 days ago, when she'd told me she was staying in to study for her psychology exam, my psychology major best friend, who apparently understood human behavior well enough to manipulate the shit out of me, I spent the next 2 days in a weird emotional limbo, oscillating between wanting to confront them both and wanting to just disappear entirely. Sarah kept texting, getting increasingly confused about why I wasn't responding. Jake, oblivious to the fact that I even existed beyond our polite classroom interactions, continued living his life without a care in the world. But here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just make you sad, it makes you creative. By Thursday, my sadness had crystallized into something much more useful: determination. I wasn't going to confront Sarah with tears and accusations. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken. I was going to get even. The plan started forming when I remembered something Sarah had mentioned weeks ago, back when she was still pretending to be my friend instead of a backstabbing boyfriend thief. She'd been gushing about this guy from her internship, Marcus, who she'd developed a massive crush on. Marcus, who was apparently everything she looked for in a guy. Marcus, who was sweet and funny and treated her like she was the most interesting person in the room. Marcus, who she'd been too nervous to make a move on because he seemed out of her league. At the time, I'd encouraged her to go for it. Best friend duty and all that. Now Marcus was going to be my secret weapon. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. Sarah had stolen my crush, but she'd been too chicken to pursue her own. While she was busy playing house with Jake, her actual dream guy was just sitting there, completely available. I started small. A little social media stalking revealed that Marcus was indeed single, reasonably attractive, and based on his posts, exactly the type of guy Sarah had described. More importantly, he worked at the marketing firm where Sarah was interning, which meant I had a legitimate reason to be in his orbit. The next Friday, I showed up at Sarah's office building around lunchtime, telling myself I was just going to scope out the situation, maybe grab coffee nearby and see if I could spot him. What I didn't expect was to literally run into him in the lobby. And by run into, I mean I was so focused on reading the building directory that I walked straight into a very solid chest carrying 2 cups of coffee. Coffee that was now all over both of us. Marcus was apologetic, frantically trying to find napkins while apologizing profusely. He was cute in that understated way Sarah had described, not the kind of guy who would make heads turn on the street, but the kind who grew more attractive the longer you looked at him. More importantly, he was kind. Genuinely, authentically kind in a way that made Sarah's description of him make perfect sense. As he helped me clean coffee off my jacket, asking if I was hurt, if he could buy me a replacement drink, if there was anything he could do to make up for the collision, a new plan started forming in my mind. One that was so beautifully poetic it almost took my breath away. Sarah had taken my crush. Fine. But what if I could give her something better? What if I could hand her the guy she actually wanted, the one she'd been too scared to pursue? What if I could be the hero of her love story, right after she'd been the villain of mine? The symmetry was perfect. The revenge would be invisible, wrapped up in what would look like the most generous gesture of friendship imaginable. Marcus was still apologizing, still looking genuinely concerned about the coffee situation, when I made my decision. I was going to help him fall in love with Sarah. And then, once they were happy and settled and planning their future together, I was going to make my move on Jake. The best part? Sarah would never see it coming. The next few weeks turned me into a fucking mastermind, and honestly, I was kind of impressed with myself. You know how they say revenge is a dish best served cold? Well, I was about to serve up a goddamn ice sculpture of karmic justice, and the best part was that everyone was going to think I was just being the world's most supportive friend. My first move was becoming Marcus's new favorite person, which turned out to be embarrassingly easy. The guy was lonely as hell. Sarah had been right about him being sweet and funny, but she'd failed to mention that he was also the kind of person who lit up like a Christmas tree when someone showed genuine interest in his life. Within a week of our coffee collision, I'd managed to establish myself as his lunch buddy, his after-work gym companion, and his go-to person for advice about everything from which Netflix series to binge to whether he should finally ask out this amazing girl from work. Yeah, you guessed it. The amazing girl from work was Sarah. Every conversation we had somehow circled back to her, and I played my role perfectly. I was the encouraging friend, the one who listened to him gush about how smart she was, how funny, how she had this way of making even the most boring office meetings interesting just by being there. I nodded along, made supportive noises, and internally cataloged every piece of information that confirmed what I already knew. Marcus was completely gone for her. The irony was delicious. Here I was, listening to a guy describe my backstabbing best friend like she was some kind of goddess, while she was off playing tonsil hockey with my crush. Marcus would go on and on about how Sarah had helped him with a presentation, or how she'd recommended this amazing book, or how she always remembered to ask about his weekend plans. Meanwhile, Sarah was texting me increasingly frantic messages about why I was being so distant, completely oblivious to the fact that her dream guy was 3 desks away from her, pining like a lovesick teenager. But here's where it gets interesting. The more time I spent with Marcus, the more I realized what a fucking catch he actually was. This wasn't just some consolation prize I was handing to Sarah. This was a guy who remembered that I didn't like tomatoes on my salads, who always held doors open without making a big show of it, who asked follow-up questions about things I'd mentioned in passing weeks earlier. He was the kind of guy who would probably plan thoughtful anniversaries for the rest of his life and never forget to call his mom on her birthday. And Sarah was going to get him. Sarah, who couldn't even be bothered to tell me she was stealing my crush before she started dating him. The unfairness of it all sat in my chest like a rock, especially during our lunch conversations when Marcus would get that dreamy look in his eyes talking about her. But then I'd remember that this was all part of the bigger picture. Sarah was going to get her fairy tale romance, and once she was safely locked down with Mr. Perfect, I was going to swoop in and claim my prize. Jake might not be the relationship material that Marcus was, but he was what I wanted. And after months of watching him from across the classroom, building up fantasies about what we could be together, I wasn't about to let Sarah's betrayal scare me off. If anything, knowing that she'd managed to get his attention proved that he was attainable. I just had to be smarter about it than she was. Phase 2 of my plan involved some light manipulation that would have made my psychology professor proud. I started dropping hints to Marcus about Sarah's schedule, her favorite coffee shop, the presentations she was nervous about. Not obvious stuff, I wasn't trying to get caught. Just casual mentions that happened to give him opportunities to accidentally run into her. Oh, Sarah mentioned she's been stressed about that client presentation next week. I'd say while we were grabbing lunch, she always goes to that little cafe on 5th Street when she needs to think. Says the lavender latte helps her focus. Marcus would file that information away with the intensity of someone studying for the bar exam, and sure enough, the next week Sarah would mention running into him at her favorite cafe, how sweet it was that he'd bought her a lavender latte when she was stressing about work. I played puppet master for 3 weeks, orchestrating a series of coincidental encounters that gradually built their friendship into something more. Marcus started staying late at the office on nights when Sarah had to work overtime. Sarah began asking him for advice about projects she could have easily handled herself. I watched it all unfold through their casual mentions and social media posts, feeling like a director watching her masterpiece come together. The best part? They both kept coming to me for advice about each other. Marcus would agonize over whether asking Sarah to grab drinks after work would be too forward, whether she was just being friendly, or if there might be something more there. I'd encourage him, telling him that life was too short to wonder, what if? That he should definitely make a move because what's the worst that could happen? Meanwhile, Sarah was finally starting to notice that Marcus existed as more than just a work colleague. She'd mention him more often during our limited conversations, asking if I thought it was weird that he always seemed to show up wherever she was, whether I thought he might be interested in her. I played dumb, told her that some guys were just naturally thoughtful, that maybe she should pay more attention to the signals he was sending. It was like watching two people dance around each other while I held all the sheet music. But the real genius of my plan wasn't just in bringing them together. It was in positioning myself as the hero of their love story. Every piece of advice I gave, every gentle push in the right direction, every coincidental encounter I orchestrated was building toward the moment when they'd look back on their relationship and remember me as the friend who helped make it all possible. I was going to be the maid of honor at their wedding. I was going to give the speech about how I always knew they were perfect for each other. I was going to be the reason they found their happily ever after. And then, once they were settled and grateful and completely absorbed in their own little bubble of domestic bliss, I was going to destroy Sarah's world the same way she'd destroyed mine. The plan for Jake was taking shape too, though it required a bit more patience. See, Sarah had made a crucial error in her approach. She'd gone for the obvious move, the direct pursuit, the aggressive flirting, the accidentally running into him all the time. It was working for now, but Jake wasn't the type to be impressed by desperation in the long run. I'd been watching him long enough to know that he liked a challenge, liked the idea of winning someone over rather than being handed their attention on a silver platter. Sarah was giving him everything too easily. She was always available, always eager, always ready to drop everything when he texted. She was playing the game like someone who'd never learned that the best way to keep someone interested was to occasionally be unavailable. My approach was going to be completely different. I was going to be the girl who seemed unattainable, who was friendly but not desperate, who had her own life and her own interests that didn't revolve around him. I was going to be everything Sarah wasn't. But first, I had to wait for Marcus and Sarah to reach the point where she was completely invested in their relationship. where she'd moved on from Jake and was building a future with someone who actually deserved her, even if she didn't deserve him. The waiting was the hardest part. Watching Sarah get everything she wanted while I played the supportive friend, biting my tongue every time she mentioned Jake, pretending to be happy about her budding romance with Marcus when every fiber of my being wanted to scream about the injustice of it all. But revenge isn't just about the payoff, it's about the process. It's about being strategic instead of reactive, about playing the long game instead of settling for the immediate satisfaction of a confrontation that would blow up in your face. Every lunch with Marcus where I played matchmaker, every conversation with Sarah where I encouraged her feelings for him, every carefully orchestrated coincidence that brought them closer together was an investment in my future happiness. I was building the foundation for a revenge so perfect that Sarah would never even realize she was being punished. The breakthrough came on a Thursday afternoon when Marcus showed up at our usual lunch spot, practically vibrating with excitement. He'd finally asked Sarah out on a real date, not just work drinks or casual coffee, but an actual Saturday night, dinner and a movie, let me pick you up at 7 date. And she'd said yes. I played my part perfectly, squealing with excitement, telling him how happy I was for both of them, making all the appropriate supportive friend noises while internally calculating how long I'd need to wait before making my move on Jake. That same evening, Sarah texted me for the first time in weeks with something other than confused questions about why I was being distant. Emergency friend meeting needed. The text read, "I have news and I need your expert advice on what to wear on a date with a guy I actually like." I stared at that message for a long moment, savoring the irony. Sarah needed my help getting ready for a date with the guy I'd personally delivered to her doorstep, so she could move on from the guy she'd stolen from me, clearing the path for me to swoop in and take him back. The symmetry was so beautiful it almost brought tears to my eyes. Almost. "Of course," I texted back. "Come over whenever. I'll order pizza and we'll figure out the perfect outfit for your big date." As I hit send, I caught my reflection in my phone screen and smiled. The girl looking back at me wasn't the heartbroken mess who'd discovered her best friend's betrayal a month ago. She was someone new, someone strategic, someone who understood that the best revenge wasn't about destruction, it was about construction. I was building Sarah's happily ever after, one carefully planned step at a time. And once it was complete, I was going to take back everything she'd stolen from me, plus interest. The date went perfectly. Of course it fucking did, because I'd basically written the script myself. Sarah came over that Friday night with 3 different outfit options and the kind of nervous energy that only comes from genuinely caring about someone's opinion of you. It was almost sweet, watching her pace around my living room, holding up dresses and asking if the blue one made her look too eager or if the black one was too formal for dinner at that Italian place Marcus had picked. I played the supportive bestie role to perfection, helping her choose the perfect outfit, the blue dress because it brought out her eyes and Marcus had specifically mentioned loving blue, doing her makeup and listening to her ramble about how nervous she was. She kept apologizing for being distant lately, making vague references to being distracted by work stuff and figuring some things out. Not once did she mention Jake. Not once did she acknowledge the elephant in the room that had been slowly suffocating our friendship for the past month. I just smiled and nodded and told her she looked beautiful, all while mentally counting down the hours until my plan could move into its final phase. The next morning, Sarah texted me a novel-length message about how amazing the date had been. Marcus had been a perfect gentleman. They'd talked for hours. He'd walked her to her door and kissed her goodnight like something out of a romantic movie. She was smitten in that obvious, all-consuming way that makes people insufferable to be around. She wanted to see him again. She thought he might be the one. She couldn't believe she'd been so blind to what was right in front of her all this time. Reading that text felt like watching the final domino fall in a chain I'd spent weeks carefully arranging. Sarah was officially off the market, completely invested in a relationship with a guy who worshipped the ground she walked on, which meant Jake was about to find himself very, very available. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Our marketing midterm was the following week, which gave me the perfect excuse to finally make my move. I'd been playing the long game with Jake too, staying friendly but not overeager, being helpful with class stuff without seeming desperate. While Sarah had been throwing herself at him like a heat-seeking missile, I'd been the cool, collected classmate who was always around but never pushy, the one who remembered details about his weekend plans and asked thoughtful follow-up questions about his internship. I waited until Tuesday, when Sarah was having lunch with Marcus again, before approaching Jake after our marketing seminar. He was packing up his laptop with that casual confidence that had first caught my attention months ago, and I felt that familiar flutter in my stomach that reminded me why I'd wanted him in the first place. My heart was pounding as I walked over, but I kept my voice steady and casual. I mentioned the midterm, how I'd been struggling with some of the concepts we'd covered in the last few weeks. Would he maybe want to study together? I knew a quiet cafe near campus that had good coffee and comfortable seating for spreading out notes and textbooks. Jake looked up from his bag with surprise, then smiled in a way that made my knees feel slightly wobbly. He'd actually been hoping to find a study partner, he said. He learned better when he could talk through concepts with someone else. The cafe I'd mentioned sounded perfect. How about Thursday evening? I managed to keep my excitement contained until I was safely in my car, and then I let out a little victory shriek that probably scared the shit out of anyone walking by. Phase 1 of Jake acquisition? Complete. Thursday evening, I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early and claimed a corner table with good lighting and enough space for both our materials. I'd chosen my outfit carefully. Casual enough to seem effortless, but flattering enough to remind Jake that I was a girl worth noticing. When he walked in, scanning the room until he spotted me waving from our table, I felt that same flutter of attraction that had started this whole mess. But here's the thing about studying with your crush. It's actually really fucking hard to concentrate on marketing concepts when the person sitting across from you keeps doing that thing with their hair that you've been fantasizing about for months. Jake was even more attractive up close, and he had this way of leaning forward when he was explaining something that made me acutely aware of how good he smelled. The studying part went better than I'd expected. Jake was patient when I asked questions, funny when the material got dry, and impressively knowledgeable about stuff I'd been struggling with. But more importantly, we had chemistry. Real, undeniable electric chemistry that made every accidental brush of fingers when we reached for the same pen feel like a small explosion. By the time we packed up our books 3 hours later, I was pretty sure the attraction was mutual. Jake lingered at the table after we'd finished, asking about my weekend plans, mentioning a new restaurant he'd been wanting to try. When I suggested we should definitely check it out together sometime, his smile was immediate and genuine. We were making plans for Saturday night when my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Girl, I think I'm falling in love. Marcus is perfect and I can't believe how happy I am. Thank you for encouraging me to give him a chance." The irony was so delicious I almost laughed out loud. Instead, I smiled at Jake and confirmed our dinner plans, feeling like a chess master who'd just achieved checkmate in the most beautiful, complicated game ever played. Saturday night with Jake exceeded every expectation I'd built up over months of crushing on him from afar. He picked me up at 7, complimented my dress in a way that made me feel like the most beautiful woman in the restaurant, and spent the entire evening making me laugh until my cheeks hurt. He was charming and attentive and exactly as wonderful as I'd imagined he would be. More importantly, he seemed genuinely interested in me. Not just attracted, though the way he looked at me across the dinner table made it clear that was definitely happening, but actually curious about my thoughts and opinions and the random stories I told about my family. When he walked me to my door at the end of the night, the goodnight kiss was everything I'd been dreaming about and more. Sweet and tentative at first, then deeper when I responded with enthusiasm that probably made it clear I'd been thinking about this moment for a very long time. As I watched him drive away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: pure, uncomplicated happiness. Not the strategic satisfaction of a plan coming together, not the vindictive pleasure of knowing I was about to get my revenge. Just the simple joy of a perfect first date with someone I really liked. For about 30 seconds, I almost felt guilty about the whole thing. Then I remembered Sarah kissing Jake on our bench, and the guilt evaporated like morning fog. The next few weeks were a blur of secret dates and stolen moments and the kind of butterflies in your stomach excitement that makes everything else in your life feel like background noise. Jake and I fell into an easy rhythm of study sessions that turned into dinner dates, coffee meetings that stretched into afternoon adventures, and text conversations that lasted until 3 in the morning. He was everything I'd imagined he would be and more. Thoughtful enough to remember that I preferred tea to coffee when I was stressed. Funny enough to make me laugh even when I was having the shittiest day. Affectionate in a way that made me feel cherished without being overwhelming. The best part? He seemed just as into me as I was into him. Within 2 weeks, we'd established ourselves as officially dating, complete with the kind of casual possessiveness that comes with knowing you're someone's person. When classmates asked if we were together, Jake would smile and say yes without any hesitation. When I posted a photo of us together on my Instagram story, he reposted it on his own with a heart emoji. We were becoming a real couple, and it felt fucking amazing. Sarah, meanwhile, was floating on cloud 9 with Marcus. They'd moved past the tentative early dating phase into full-blown relationship territory with impressive speed. Marcus was bringing her flowers to work, Sarah was cooking dinner for him on weekends, and they were already talking about taking a trip together over winter break. She'd also completely stopped mentioning Jake, which told me everything I needed to know about how over him she was. Marcus had done exactly what I'd hoped he would do, made her forget that Jake had ever existed as anything more than a casual hookup. It was perfect. Everything was falling into place exactly as I'd planned. But here's the thing about revenge plots. They're only satisfying if the person you're getting revenge on actually knows they're being punished. Sarah was living her best life, completely oblivious to the fact that I'd orchestrated her entire relationship and stolen back the guy she'd taken from me. She thought she'd gotten away with her betrayal. She thought we were still friends who'd just grown apart naturally. That wasn't going to work for me. The opportunity for the grand reveal came 3 weeks later, at Emma's birthday party. It was one of those casual house parties where everyone from our extended friend group would be there, including both Sarah and Marcus and Jake and me. The perfect setting for a little public drama. I'd been planning this moment for weeks, rehearsing different versions of how I wanted it to play out. The key was timing and audience. I needed witnesses, but not so many that it felt like a public humiliation. I wanted Sarah to understand exactly what had happened, but I also wanted to come out looking like the reasonable one. Jake and I arrived together, his hand warm and reassuring in mine as we navigated through the crowd of familiar faces. Sarah was already there with Marcus, looking radiant in that way people do when they're disgustingly happy. She spotted us almost immediately, and I watched her face go through a series of expressions as she processed what she was seeing. Confusion first, then recognition, then something that looked like panic. She made her way over to us, Marcus trailing behind with the kind of polite smile people wear when they're meeting their girlfriend's friends for the first time. Jake squeezed my hand and went to grab us drinks, leaving me face to face with Sarah and her new boyfriend. The conversation started innocently enough. Sarah introduced Marcus, who was every bit as charming in person as I'd expected him to be. He thanked me for all the advice I'd given him about Sarah, mentioning how helpful I'd been in encouraging him to ask her out. Sarah's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read, but she smiled and played along. Then Jake came back with our drinks, and the energy shifted completely. I watched Sarah's face as Jake casually draped his arm around my shoulders, as he kissed my temple while handing me my beer, as he settled into the easy intimacy of a couple who'd been together for weeks. Her expression went through confusion, realization, and then something that looked dangerously close to betrayal. Marcus, oblivious to the undercurrents, was making friendly conversation with Jake about some sports team. Sarah was staring at me like she was trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. That's when I decided it was time to put her out of her misery. I waited until Marcus was distracted by someone calling his name from across the room, until Jake was engaged in conversation with another classmate, until it was just Sarah and me standing close enough to have a private conversation in the middle of the crowded party. Then I looked her directly in the eyes and smiled the sweetest smile I could manage. "So," I said, my voice casual and friendly, "how long did you think you could date my crush behind my back without me finding out?" The color drained from Sarah's face so quickly I thought she might actually faint. Her mouth opened and closed a few times without any sound coming out, like a fish gasping for air. "I saw you," I continued, still smiling, "3 months ago on our bench, kissing Jake while I was texting you about how nervous I was to finally ask him out." Sarah found her voice, stammering something about how she could explain, how it wasn't what I thought, how she'd been meaning to tell me. "Oh, don't worry," I said, cutting her off with a gentle laugh. "I'm not mad anymore." That clearly wasn't what she'd been expecting to hear. The confusion on her face was almost comical. "Actually, I should probably thank you," I continued, watching her face carefully. "If you hadn't gone behind my back with Jake, I never would have realized what an amazing guy Marcus was." Now she looked like I'd spoken in a foreign language. "You know Marcus, right? Your boyfriend? The guy you've been gushing about for the past month? The one you said was perfect and might be the one?" Sarah nodded slowly, clearly not understanding where this was going. "Funny thing about Marcus," I said, my smile getting a little sharper. "He's been in love with you for months. Completely head over heels, would do anything for you in love, but he was too shy to make a move." I paused, letting that sink in. So when I met him a few weeks ago, I thought, what kind of friend would I be if I didn't help true love find its way? I spent weeks playing matchmaker, making sure you two would run into each other, giving him advice about how to win you over, encouraging him to finally ask you out. The realization was dawning on Sarah's face like a slow-motion car crash. "You could say I helped orchestrate your entire relationship," I said, my voice still friendly and conversational. "Just like you helped yourself to mine." Sarah's face had gone completely white. She was staring at me like she'd never seen me before, which, in a way, she hadn't. "But here's the beautiful part," I continued, really enjoying myself now. "Marcus is perfect for you. He's kind and thoughtful, and he'll probably spend the rest of his life trying to make you happy. You got the better deal, honestly." I glanced over at Jake, who was laughing at something one of our classmates had said, looking relaxed and happy and completely unaware of the drama unfolding 10 feet away from him. "Jake's great for a fun fling, but he's not really relationship material, is he? You figured that out pretty quickly." "Marcus, though? Marcus is the kind of guy you marry." Sarah finally found her voice, but it came out as barely a whisper. "You did this on purpose. I helped two people who were perfect for each other find their way to love," I said, shrugging innocently. "How is that a bad thing?" She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her mind working, trying to figure out how to respond to this revelation. "How do you get angry at someone for giving you everything you wanted? How do you complain about being manipulated into the best relationship of your life?" "The funny thing is," I said, leaning in closer, "you're going to thank me at your wedding. You're going to give a speech about how grateful you are to have such a wonderful friend who helped you realize what you really wanted." Sarah's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "And I'm going to smile and nod and be the best maid of honor you could ask for," I continued. "Because that's what friends do for each other, right? We help each other get what we deserve." That last word hung in the air between us like a blade. Marcus appeared at Sarah's side, smiling and oblivious, asking if she was ready for another drink. Jake rejoined our little group, sliding his arm around my waist in a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. Sarah looked back and forth between all of us, her perfect boyfriend who adored her, my reclaimed crush who was clearly smitten with me, and me with my satisfied smile that probably made it clear I'd gotten exactly what I wanted. "I think I need some air," she mumbled, and practically fled toward the back door. Marcus looked confused, asking if she was okay, if something had upset her. I just shrugged and suggested that maybe she'd had a little too much to drink, that she probably just needed a few minutes to collect herself. Jake asked if we should go check on her, being the decent human being that he was. I told him she'd be fine, that Sarah just got overwhelmed at parties sometimes, that Marcus should probably be the one to make sure she was okay. As Marcus headed outside to find his girlfriend, Jake squeezed my hand and asked if I was having a good time. I looked up at him, this beautiful, funny, charming guy who was finally mine, and smiled. "The best time?" I said, and meant every word. Through the back window, I could see Sarah and Marcus on the patio. She was clearly upset, gesturing wildly while she explained something to him. He looked confused at first, then concerned, then something that might have been impressed. After a few minutes, he pulled her into a hug that looked like comfort and reassurance, and the kind of support you get from someone who loves you unconditionally. They came back inside 20 minutes later, hand in hand, looking like they'd weathered a storm together and come out stronger for it. Marcus nodded at me politely, his expression neutral but not unfriendly. Sarah avoided eye contact entirely. But here's the thing about consequences. They don't stop just because the moment of reckoning is over. For the rest of the party, I got to watch Sarah squirm every time she looked at Marcus and remembered that their entire relationship was built on my manipulation. Every sweet gesture he made, every loving look he gave her, every moment of happiness they shared was tainted by the knowledge that I had orchestrated it all. She got everything she wanted, but now she knew it had come at a price. She had to live with the knowledge that her perfect relationship was also a perfect revenge, and there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it without destroying the best thing that had ever happened to her. Meanwhile, I had Jake, the guy I'd wanted from the beginning, who was now looking at me like I was the most fascinating woman in the room, who was making plans for next weekend and talking about movies he wanted to see with me, and generally acting like a man who was falling hard and fast. As we left the party together, Jake's hand warm in mine, and Sarah's shocked face burned into my memory like a brand. I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Complete and total satisfaction. The game was over, and I had won everything. 3 months later, I'm sitting in my favorite coffee shop, scrolling through Sarah's Instagram engagement photos, and I can't stop laughing. Because the universe apparently has a sense of humor about poetic justice, and Marcus proposed to her at the exact same cafe where I'd orchestrated their first accidental encounter. The ring is gorgeous. A vintage sapphire that's so perfectly Sarah's style. It's like Marcus crawled inside her brain and pulled out her exact fantasy. Which, let's be honest, he basically did, thanks to all the intel I'd fed him during our matchmaking lunches. The proposal photos are disgustingly romantic. Marcus on one knee in front of the window where they'd shared that first awkward coffee date, Sarah with her hands over her mouth in perfect surprise, both of them crying happy tears like something out of a Nicholas Sparks movie. The caption reads, "She said yes to forever with my best friend, my soulmate, my everything. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life making her as happy as she makes me every single day." I screenshot it and send it to Jake with the message, "Look at this cute shit. We're definitely getting an invitation." His response comes back immediately, "Good thing I look amazing in a tux. Think they'll have an open bar? That's my boyfriend. Practical to the core. And yes, boyfriend. Official, Instagram public, meeting each other's parents' boyfriend." It turns out that getting Jake wasn't just about winning him back from Sarah. It was about finally having him see me as more than just that girl from marketing class. Once I stopped pining from a distance and actually let him get to know me, we clicked in ways I'd never expected. He likes that I'm independent and have my own opinions about things. He appreciates that I don't lose my shit when he wants to hang out with his friends or when he needs space to work on his projects. He says I'm funnier than most people realize, which might be the best compliment anyone's ever given me. We've been together for 4 months now, and it's been exactly what I'd hoped it would be. Easy and comfortable, and filled with the kind of inside jokes that make other people roll their eyes. Jake is attentive without being clingy, ambitious about his future without being obsessed with work, and he kisses me like he means it every single time. More importantly, he chose me. Not because I manipulated circumstances or played games or orchestrated elaborate schemes. He chose me because he likes who I am when I'm being myself, not when I'm being strategic. The irony isn't lost on me that my best relationship started with the most calculated revenge plot I've ever executed. Sarah and I haven't spoken since the engagement announcement went public 2 weeks ago. She sent me a text the day after Emma's party, a long, rambling message about how she understood why I was angry, but she hoped we could find a way to move past this because she missed her best friend and she was sorry for not being honest about Jake from the beginning. I read it, felt absolutely nothing, and deleted it without responding. Then she tried calling a few times, sent another text asking if we could meet for coffee to talk things through. When I didn't respond to that either, she finally got the message and stopped reaching out. I thought I'd feel more guilty about ghosting someone who'd been my best friend for 3 years. Instead, I mostly felt relieved. Like finally setting down a heavy bag I'd been carrying around without realizing how much it was weighing me down. The truth is, our friendship had been over the moment she decided to pursue Jake behind my back. Everything that came after was just me refusing to accept that someone I trusted had chosen to betray me rather than have an honest conversation about what she wanted. But here's what I didn't expect. I don't actually hate her anymore. Somewhere between orchestrating her perfect love story and building my own, the anger just evaporated. When I see her posts about Marcus, when I hear through mutual friends that they're talking about moving in together, when I see them being disgustingly happy in public, I feel something closer to satisfaction than spite. She got what she deserved in the best possible way. Marcus worships the ground she walks on, treats her like a queen, and will probably spend the rest of his life trying to make her happy. He's the kind of guy who'll remember anniversaries and bring her soup when she's sick, and never once make her wonder if she's loved. Sarah got her fairy tale ending, and she knows I'm the one who made it possible. That knowledge sits between us like a third person in every photo, every milestone, every moment of happiness. She can never look at Marcus without remembering that I handed him to her, gift-wrapped and perfect for her in every way that mattered. She'll spend her whole marriage knowing that her greatest love story was also my greatest revenge. And that's honestly more satisfying than any screaming match or friendship-ending confrontation could have been. Jake has no idea about any of this, obviously. As far as he knows, Sarah and I just drifted apart after college, the way friendships sometimes do when people get busy with their own lives. He knows we used to be close, knows that she's with Marcus now, knows that we'll probably see them at mutual friends events and we should all be perfectly civil to each other. He doesn't know that I spent weeks plotting the most elaborate relationship manipulation scheme in the history of petty revenge. He doesn't need to. This was never about him anyway. This was about Sarah learning that actions have consequences, and me learning that I'm capable of playing the long game better than I ever imagined. The wedding invitation arrived yesterday, exactly as I'd predicted it would. Cream-colored cardstock with elegant script, inviting Jake and me to celebrate the marriage of Sarah and Marcus in 6 months. There's a handwritten note on the back in Sarah's familiar writing, "I hope you'll be there. It wouldn't be the same without you." I showed it to Jake, who immediately started calculating whether we'd need to book a hotel room and whether he'd have to rent a tux. He's excited about the wedding, keeps talking about how nice it'll be to see everyone together and how romantic autumn weddings always are. I smile and nod and help him look up suit rental options, all while savoring the delicious irony of Sarah asking me to celebrate the relationship I created for her. Because of course I'm going to that wedding. I'm going to wear something stunning and dance with my gorgeous boyfriend and give the most heartfelt toast about love finding a way and how happy I am for the beautiful couple. I'm going to be the perfect wedding guest, the supportive friend who helped make it all possible. And when Sarah looks at me across the reception hall, she'll remember exactly how she got there. She'll remember that her perfect day, her perfect husband, her perfect life was built on the foundation of my perfect revenge. She'll know that every time she kisses Marcus, she's kissing the man I chose for her. Every time he tells her he loves her, she'll hear the echo of my voice telling him exactly how to win her heart. Every anniversary they celebrate will be a reminder that I orchestrated their entire love story. That's the beautiful thing about this kind of revenge. It doesn't destroy, it creates. Sarah gets everything she wanted, and so do I. Marcus gets the love of his life. Jake gets a girlfriend who actually appreciates him instead of taking him for granted. Everyone wins, except Sarah also gets to live with the knowledge that her happiness exists because I allowed it to. I take one more look at the engagement photos, at Sarah's radiant smile and Marcus's adoring expression, and I feel that familiar flutter of satisfaction in my chest. Then I put my phone away and text Jake to see if he wants to grab dinner tonight, because I have my own love story to focus on now, one that doesn't require manipulation or strategy or elaborate schemes. Just two people who like each other enough to build something real together. It turns out the best revenge isn't just getting even. It's getting everything you wanted while making sure the person who wronged you gets exactly what they deserve. And sometimes, if you're really good at playing the game, those two things can be the exact same thing. 3 months from now, I'll stand up at Sarah's wedding and give a speech about the power of true love and the importance of good friends who help you see what's right in front of you. I'll toast their happiness and their future and the beautiful way their love story unfolded. And I'll mean every fucking word of it. Because this is how you win at revenge. You make sure everyone gets their happy ending, especially you.